All right,
Okay.
so did you want to,
That'll pick up my conversation too, I think.
okay, yeah,
I don't know how long
I'm
this will
seeing
record
the,
or anything, but anyway, it does a better job than the one that I paid $50 for a year on, that somebody recommended that manuscript to me that they thought was good. And it did not pick up very far either. It had to be close. This one probably has to be close too. I haven't tested it, but checked it for distance. But it's free.
well, I can see
Yeah.
it's, what is that, subtitles for us there, or?
I don't know what it's called. It showed up as the little dot that floats around. I didn't put it on there. And it gets in the way sometimes. But anyway, what do you want to know?
Okay, so this was owned by Grandpa Clinkscale. It's a crystal radio set,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
okay, and he made it from a kit,
Yes.
right?
I
So,
understand. Yeah. I
like,
guess,
what was in the kit? Just like all these parts?
I think so. Not
I mean-
not the wood, but I guess wire that he wrapped around.
Okay, that wasn't already wrapped.
No, it wasn't. As far as I was told, but he had the wire. It's called bell wire, I believe, because it's doesn't have insulation on it, but it has a coating. So it actually is a little bit insulated. Each wrap is insulated from the earlier wrap. Bell
Oh.
wire,
Uh-huh.
I don't know how many volts or amps it'll carry, but it must have been used in telephones.
So what's it wrapped around?
Um, well, as I recall, a oatmeal box, but this is too small. At least the oatmeal boxes in my time were bigger than that,
Uh-huh.
and still are. So it's some kind of cardboard box, though, that he provided apparently for himself. But I suppose the kit included these metal pieces and the crystal holder and probably these little jacks here and this one up here. That's all I know.
So there's,
There's a cat whisker inside there.
okay, I see something wrapped around.
No, I'll show you. That could be tightened up. Thought it would slip out of there.
So this was during the 1920s or before the 1920s? Or
Early 1920s, I think.
and was he was at Bonita at the time when he got this?
He was what?
At Bonita?
Bonita? Yeah, I think so. I thought that slipped out of there. There it comes. Oh, there is a crystal. The original crystals were just pieces of rock.
This, what is that, a piece of rock surrounded
It's
by?
a piece of rock inside a little surround, and so you can see it right here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what did they call it? It has a name,
Type of rock.
yeah, that has, you know what isinglass is? Isinglass, it came before transparent plastic. And you can, apparently, it came in sheets, or they can mine it in large pieces,
Mm-hmm.
shave off these thin ones, you could see through them.
Hmm.
And they would line things, one the light to pass through it, you put a piece of isinglass in there. Then they developed plastics. I don't know why they didn't just put glass in, but anyway. But this crystal it can be found in rocks or among rocks, different formations. And so this part of it is the live part. Here, I don't think it's like a battery that runs down. I think it's always there.
So that provides the power for this?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Only it provides just that little bit of power that picks up all of the stuff that's floating around in the ether and atmosphere and such. And so to use it, you have the cat whisker,
Uh-huh.
and you have to brush it around very gently and find a hot spot on here that would pick up the signal.
Uh-huh.
And the original one that I had was just a piece of that rock.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a lot of places to scratch with this. With this, you have to be careful, and there's just a small area. And if you're careful and everything else is working, you get it on the right spot, and you can get a radio station or code. And I know that shortwave people, back when I first got interested in radios, if you got on at 1 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the morning, and you could tune around your radio, and you would hit these codes, just going on and on and on and on for, as far as I know, forever.
People having conversations in Morse code.
Well, no, they couldn't be read because they were in code, somebody's code.
So this was military that you were, you don't know?
Nobody I ever talked to seemed to know what it was. I didn't talk to a lot of people, but Marshall Inser, for example, who was a radio expert at high school,
Mm-hmm.
he didn't know what it was. It's just that you can hear the code, and it doesn't mean anything to anybody but the person receiving it. And you tune different stations, and sometimes it would be louder, and sometimes you'd get one that was very soft. But because of the reception being better at night, and there was less interference then, you could hear this at night, and that's probably why you could hear it then. They were sending, if that was real code and they were sending messages, better to send it at night when it didn't have interference.
So this didn't just pick up that, it also picked up actual, like a radio station?
No, it picked up ham operators. Well, it might pick up a radio station now. The clear channel stations across the border in Mexico that had more power than the U.S. stations were allowed to use. And, well, there were clear channel stations in the U.S. These were strong stations.
Mm-hmm.
and they were only permitted in certain locales across the country. But Mexico didn't have rules, and so they had these powerful radio stations, and you could always, middle of the night or anytime, tune in on someplace in Mexico, I've forgotten the name of the town, across the border, and get music or somebody talking about endlessly about something or other. And you could pick those up because they were more powerful.
So the radio stations, and this is, okay, back in the 1920s when your grandfather would have been listening to them maybe. How were the radio stations funded? Was it advertised? Did they have like commercials like what they have now, or?
I doubt it. I can't tell you because I never heard any of them.
Oh,
The main thing that you could pick up, that Marshall Lyncher was interested in getting his listeners to build a crystal set for, was to pick up him and other ham operators.
okay. So were some of those ham operators, you know, they just got on it to be on a soapbox and say stuff,
Yeah,
and some of them were like, well, I don't have anything good to say here, listen to some music.
I never had a lot of experience. Well, I never did any ham operating, but CQ. You would use your key and you would tap that CQ. And this was a call for somebody to answer you. And so some other ham someplace would hear that, they would tune in to your frequency and talk to you. And they just chatted. And a couple of ham operators that I am aware of talked all the time. they could talk all the time. And there's one man here that is a ham operator. And when I was talking with him about this, and I mentioned Marshall Lyncher, he checked on his cell phone. Was his wife's name Emma? I'm not sure that's right. Yes, it was. He's on, you can find him on the internet. He and his wife both taught at Olathe High School when my dad went to school and when I went to school. And Marshall had tower, where you saw the tower.
Yeah, I went to
And so,
at least walked around the outside of the museum
yeah,
with you and Bob.
you ought to go back to see that. But the man here doesn't do a lot of it, and I don't know if he does any right now. But he said that the latest thing is that in order to get distance, because the horizon is sometimes the limit,
Mm-hmm.
but in good conditions, you can go around the world with it.
Well, you bounce the signals or something.
I guess, I don't know how it works, but anyway, they're bouncing them off the moon now. And I don't know what they have to do that, but they send a signal up, it bounces back, and it can hit the other side of the earth.
So you have to have some sort of program that aims your signal
Probably.
and
Mhm. Yeah.
knows where the moon is in relation to where you are,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, it may be very limited to certain times of the month and things like that. I don't know, I haven't talked with him. That's a good question. I'll ask him that if I have a chance. He's a brain surgeon, all retired, who takes a lot of the pictures here for different things, publicity pictures and things like that. And he's a radio operator, ham operator, stuff. So So he built this, and I really don't know how much, if he used it or if it was successful. I assume it was. But when I tried to use it, I got one time, I got some signal, some conversation or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what I don't remember what I was hearing. But I took it and I strung whatever the limit says here, 250 feet of wire or something out through the trees
Mm-hmm.
and got everything hooked up. And I did get one success. But I guess my interest just wasn't that strong. I was in high school, I had other things. So I never tried it all that much.
Okay, if moving the whisker around got you the station or whatever, what did these things do for you?
Well, I never used it enough to know. I think these would be helping you tune in to it stronger, which probably would give you more volume
Mm-hmm.
too. Why it takes two of them, where they should be positioned, I have no idea. There's
Well,
a club in Kirkwood, so you can go to the meetings and find out.
Okay. And I guess this is probably something else. You mentioned there's like a coating on this wire, and I just kind of wondering, like moving this stuff back and forth, whether that would have gradually.
I've wondered about that myself. I thought, if this is bell wire that is already coated, then why would these things do anything? Because they're on the outside of the coating.
Yeah, I didn't think about that.
So maybe that's not correct. I don't know. But I wish I had kept the old earphones, because they were just two little round things that smashed into your ears. And there was a thing that could adjust
Mm-hmm.
to shorten it or lengthen it here. And then a couple of wires joined, came down here to these two prongs, and you plug them in. Very uncomfortable, probably not too effective. They did work, because I plugged them into some radio and I could hear with them. But they were old, and there was, over your top of your head, there was a little strip of canvas-like material covering the wires that held it together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was frayed and torn or something. So I threw them away.
Yeah.
Got a set of better hearing aids, better earphones, and that required this big prong. And so then I had to get a new mount here for that. But having only used it once, basically. So, but I don't know, that's about the story.
So, at some point, your grandpa Klinkskill got he couldn't transmit on this.
No.
He could just listen.
Just listen. And of course, that was Marshall's procedure. He would broadcast instructions on how to build a transmitter.
Okay, so you started off with this.
And I guess, I don't know if he sold the kits or told you where to buy them or what. So, if my grandfather followed through with that, he would listen to Marshall. He would buy or acquire the kit. He would build his receiver. No, he wouldn't listen to him to begin with.
Right.
I don't know how he would first hear about Marshall. Maybe Marshall would send him a letter or something. He was a neighbor, so he would hear
Mhm.
that way, but other people around the country, I don't know. Anyway, Marshall would somehow get him to have a kit. He would build a receiver, then he could listen to Marshall and build a transmitter. Marshall would tell him step by step how to build a transmitter. Once he got the transmitter, then he could talk back to Marshall.
Okay, I'd heard bits of the story before, and that's one of the things that didn't make sense in my mind, because for some reason I thought this was something that you could go back and forth with. And it's like you would listen to Marshall in order to build one of these things, but I didn't understand how you could listen to Marshall unless you already had one of these things. So,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Yeah, and I don't know that part of the story either. So
Okay, but you would buy this first. Probably you're over at your neighbor's house and you see that they've got something like this, and he says, "Well, what you do is you get one of these things, and then this Marshall guy will tell you how to put together the next part or something like that."
Yeah,
Which
you
I
may have
assume
to go
was
to
something
Kansas City to buy to there was a radio shop in Kansas City that sold all kinds of electrical parts. And maybe you had to go there to buy the kit. I don't know.
Radio Shack.
That type of place, only bigger and better.
Yeah.
It didn't go, well, it isn't around anymore, so maybe it went broke. So,
Or got bought
Where did
by.
Lance go?
Here, no, that's my battery.
Where did Lance go?
Oh.
So, that's about all I know about that.
So, your grandpa Klingskill at some point got a more modern radio.
Well, yes. They came out with all kinds of more modern radios. Super Heterodyne, I think is the way you pronounce it. It was,
What is that? The name of a
that
radio
was
or?
the name of that was the type of radio. And in it, he had large tubes.
Vacuum tubes?
Like light bulbs. And they had elements in them that generated radio waves, or picked up radio waves rather. And this was a specific type of radio that, I don't know if that was the first type that was available, but he had one, and it was supposedly a good, fairly expensive radio. And heterodyne or something similar to that, because that was the name of the tube as it went in. And if it went out, you took the tubes and you went into a Radio Shack type place, and they tested the tubes, and if they weren't working, they'd sell you new ones. And,
And so when you were a kid, did your parents always have a radio that you knew about, or?
the radios I can remember, we didn't have electricity. Grandpa and Grandma had electricity, but we never did until I was, into second, third, fourth, fifth grade or so.
Was this before you had moved to Gardner?
Oh yeah, it's before that. It was, we got electricity when we lived down near Paola. Yeah. And so we had battery operated radio.
Before that?
Yeah. As I recall, a small radio and a battery about the same size. It was a great big battery. And I imagine it cost quite a bit at that time. Whatever it cost, you know, it may have been $1.50, but that was big money. And so, what would happen when I was in early grade school, at least, I liked to listen to Captain Midnight, Jack Armstrong. Those are the two that come to mind. These were serials
Mm-hmm.
every afternoon at 4:15, 4:30. Captain Midnight would come on for 15 minutes. Then Jack Armstrong for 15 minutes, something like that. And so I was permitted to listen just those periods of time. Otherwise, they saved the radio. I don't know if they listened at night, low, mainly for market forecasts, weather forecasts, and things like that. Because of it, if I listened to too many serials, I'd run the battery down, and it was expensive.
Mm-hmm. So you had to hook it up to an antenna of some type?
I think it's set on top of the radio, or like the television rabbit ears, but I really don't remember.
I just kind of curious because I remember how it was something that Grandpa always was concerned with. He was concerned with lightning hitting an antenna. And as far as I know, like the house that they built at Bonita, they had the antenna not on the roof, but in the attic.
Yeah.
Because he didn't, because
Yeah.
he thought, and it sounds logical that
But I think that was for television.
yeah, that was for television, but I figured, well, I didn't know whether the radio sets back then, I mean, this one needed some sort of wire stretched up, so I didn't know.
This needed a lot of wire.
Yeah, so I didn't know whether the
Well,
other radios needed something.
the radios I can remember either had an antenna that would telescope out
Mm-hmm.
and around different directions. In fact, I just threw away one of those. So, and, they had something that's set beside or on top of the radio, or it was in the handle, things like that. Well, eventually, I remember when the pocket radios came out,
Mm-hmm.
and
Little transistor ones?
Huh?
The transistor radios or something else?
they had to be transistor.
Okay.
Because they were, like I said, well, they were bigger than a cell phone, but not too much bigger.
Yeah.
And, I don't know.
Mm.
So, when the television first came out, you had to have pretty much an outside antenna, I think. Because Grandpa had one of the first televisions,
Grandpa Clinkscale?
Clinkscale,
Okay.
and he had it in the front living room. Nobody used that living room. It had all the furnishings in it, but no one ever went in there. There wasn't any heat in there for one thing. But he would go in there and sit in front of the television and watch wrestling. And I don't know if he ever watched anything else or not. That's what he was watching when I came around. And,
So
and
was
he
this
had to have a wire that ran outside through a window, and then something on the outside for an antenna.
So when he wasn't using the TV, did he like disconnect that?
No, they didn't have to disconnect the antenna. No.
Just,
Just-
it wasn't set up in such a way that he had to worry about lightning strike.
No, well, it would probably be just a thing he hung on the window,
Oh, okay.
or a wire. I think you had to use a dual wire. There's two wires with plastic in between them, flexible
Mm-hmm.
in between them, so that they were separated about as far as that. And you ran that from the television, you plugged in both ends of both wires,
Right.
and then that went out to your antenna. Or that was the antenna, and we used to get those, they'd be real flat wires.
Mm-hmm.
This unit was a flat piece. Put it under the rug, and it wouldn't cause a mound under the rug. And that way you could spread it out over the floor and get better reception by having it spread out. There's a T ran out here and it went both ways. And
You didn't have to get a grandkid to hold one end of it and, turn a little this way.
well, that was the thing, under the rug you couldn't adjust it. And the TVs would have this loop, and some of them would have straight antennas too. And you twist this around, the straight antennas would pivot out and up, and you put them out like this, and you'd adjust them around till you could get the picture in clear.
I remember something that is always kind of amusing. But yeah, you on the TVs, you adjust this, but sometimes it wasn't the antenna that needed to be adjusted. I could stand up from my chair and bend over, and suddenly the TV would get great reception. And if I sat back down, it would start messing up again. So you just have to sit there, half up out of your seat. And I had no idea why that made any difference.
I don't either. I know that it always made a difference, or often it would make a difference if you were having bad reception. When you went up to turn the antenna, as soon as you touched it, it got good or it got bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so you turn it a little bit, and then you turn loose of it to see what it was doing, and then you take it, turn it a little more. Then, I guess the power was much lower, besides the technology, but they probably couldn't push the TV waves the signals out as well as they can now.
Well, I think now, especially with digital, but I think it was getting better all the time that now with the digital, we can you just need a very narrow bandwidth. And before you needed a larger bandwidth in order to get the signal out there. And
maybe it's stronger than that.
And if you had put too much power, it would bleed over onto some other station's signal. And until they could get it, with the digital now, it's just like a real narrow.
Yeah, maybe because I know there were problems of running out of bandwidth. And so if they could narrow it down, they could have more stations.
Yeah, but I think that kept getting better and better, which meant the stations could put more and more power into just their bandwidth.
Yeah.
And then just the digital, I think it's just, that was a huge leap in what the available bandwidth.
Well,
Of course, now everybody's doing things on the internet, and I don't know how much bandwidth.
yeah, well, it's all wired, except just within the house or something. But, well, is this enough of this? I don't know anymore.
So that one guy was your shop teacher? What was his name? Your shop teacher who did the radio?
Marshall Enser.
Marshall Enser. So you had him just for shop?
Yeah, well, shop and radio club. And my first class with him was mechanical drawing. It was one semester. And I've got all my good mechanical crafts. You know, he would set a thing up like this. He said, draw all sides of it. And we'd look at it and try to figure out using a T-square and triangles and the thing that measures angle.
Mm-hmm.
And what's that called? Anyway, and draw
Protractor?
protractor. Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I don't know how I remembered that. Where
So-
that word came out of the dusty cobwebs in the back?
This is way too complicated for what I was doing, but if you closed it up, then I'd draw it. So, anyway, yeah, I had him for that, and then I had him for, I think, 2.5 years of shop. Because you didn't have to take a foreign language, you didn't have to take physics, you didn't have to take chemistry. You could take shop. What?
Is that your desk that you made in shop right there?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Here, we're gonna move and show Dad's desk. There, I made I think I made a can opener, and I did make a box, a little tiny box.
Well, I made that in my junior year, I think, because I didn't take shop in senior year.
And you didn't have any measurements. You
Right.
you looked at like a catalog or
This
something?
copied a desk that was in one of the mail order catalogs. Sears, Roebuck, Montgomery Ward, Spiegels. And, but I didn't have any dimensions. And so Marshall Enser and I worked it out, or he may have done most of the working out of the dimensions. Anyway,
So the all the little handles, you like bought those at a hardware store, or
what?
all these handles, you got those like at a hardware store or something, or?
Oh, no, these just came from a hardware store or a place that sold those kinds of things.
Oh. Well,
So, all right.
and so he has a museum in, what that would be, what is that, Olathe? Is that the Olathe area that?
Olathe High School.
Well, no, his museum, which is out at his property.
Oh, no, Bonita.
Nobody knows where Bonita is anymore.
Yeah,
People
south-
drive through Bonita every day and they,
6 miles south of Olathe.
okay.
Now, Olathe extends past that probably by now, for
Yeah.
sure. So, anyway.
Which is so crazy to me.
Yeah.
You know, next three
everybody-
exits, but Olathe. I was like, what? No, Olathe is this
A lot
little
of
tiny
people know
town.
about Olathe here.
Pardon me?
A lot of people here know about Olathe. They have family, live in Kansas City. Often family live in Olathe. They're basically from Kansas City, but they live in Olathe. It's just a suburb.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
Which,
it's, yeah, and the Lenexa, they talk about Lenexa, Overland Park. They know all about these towns because their daughter lives there or something, lives in Olathe or lives in Lenexa. And,
yeah, they know all about these towns, but they don't know them like the way you know them, which is, well,
okay.
I think we've covered this
Yeah,
subject.
why don't you turn that
Thank you
thing
for your,
off? I
okay.
wonder, am I still recording? Doesn't-
Yeah, I think so.